The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday. Awesome. So, folks, let's jump straight into it. For those of you who have helped us with getting our books, we are really, really thankful to you because the profits from our books are going to entrepreneurs impacted by multiple areas across the globe. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And for those who have not got our copies, if you're looking to become an influencer, in whatever area you are in, whether you're an entrepreneur, professional, or a CEO, or if you are looking to grow your business, get our books. One is The Entrepreneur's Garden, another one is Expert to Influencer. And also, I'm going to invite you to take 1 hour of your time every month, especially beginning with this holiday season, and help somebody out with no strings attached. So let's talk about our guest today. So our guest is Omar Harris. He is the founder of Intent Consulting. He's a former GM, General Manager of GSK and Allergan. For those of you guys who don't know about it, these are major pharmaceutical companies. He's an executive coach and award-winning best-selling author of 5 books. And one of his books is Be a Jedi Leader, Not a Boss. And leadership books around diversity, inclusion, servant leadership. And we will be talking to him today. Welcome, Omar.
Very much. Very happy to be here. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Omar, we begin our story in the childhood. So tell us, if you recall a moment that stands out for you even today from your childhood.
Well, what stands out for me from my childhood was I actually started my first business when I was 7 years old. So we were living in a neighborhood that happened to be next to a golf course, a public golf course. And the fathers were complaining about how golf balls kept getting sucked into their lawnmowers, and they were strewed all over our backyards. And so I asked all the kids in the neighborhood to collect all the golf balls they could find, and we actually started selling the golf balls back to the golfers. And so from a very early age, I learned kind of like what entrepreneurship is and what business is really just, taking something that's maybe annoying or an annoyance and transforming that into business opportunity. And we financed our entire summer of pool parties and French fries and good times off of the business. And so that was a really memorable experience for me at an early age.
Yeah, no, that's definitely sounds like fun, I can definitely see you running around, and just kind of talking. And I'm sure that the golfers were thrilled, especially when young kids are coming up to them and they were encouraging.
Well, not all of them. The one golfer who's in our business basically ran us off the course. He was like, "You kids are, this is not right. You're stealing our golf balls. You're, da, 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 da." We were actually providing a service, but this one guy threatened to, to call the cops on us. And so basically that was the end of that business. So also learned about regulatory and other aspects of business that I wouldn't learn again for many, many years. But yeah, there's always barriers, always things you have to navigate to stay successful and to keep your mission going.
That's fantastic. So as you grew up, what interest did you have in your high school?
So in high school, I was kind of like a jack of all trades. I did a little bit of everything. I was in the band orchestra. I was in the marching band. I was in student government. I was also a student athlete. And so kind of I tell people that my school was like a professional job. I was working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day already in high school, putting in long hours of following my passions and and really I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in high school in terms of what was my ultimate objective, but I knew that I was just trying to express my talents in as many ways as possible.
Well, that's awesome, right? The only way you can know is by exposing yourself to multiple things and then figuring out what brings you the most joy. So as
Exactly.
you move through college, what was your major or concentration in?
So in college, I ended up majoring in business and marketing. So I went to Florida A&M University, which is a historically Black college and university located in Tallahassee, Florida. And they have a very world-renowned business program called the School of Business and Industry. And I was lucky enough to join that program. And from that moment on, I knew I was gonna do something in business, but I didn't know exactly what until I got my first internship working for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals back in 1998 as a sales rep in Detroit, Michigan. And that's really what set my trajectory for the healthcare industry.
Mm-hmm. And was there something about pharmaceuticals that you got attracted to, or it was just a flow of that, I'm applying for internships and here I get and here I go?
Well, yeah, I was just at the time we had to apply for internships. I'd been interviewing for 2 weeks straight with everybody, 3M, at the time Arthur Anderson, Medtronic, all these different companies were coming down to school to interview us, and so Pfizer was the last interview on the last day of 2 weeks of interviewing, and I at the time I really wasn't actually taking it quite too seriously. I remember I woke up like 12 minutes before the interview. And I don't recommend this to anybody, but I showed up and somehow ended up getting the job. And and based on that, I got a chance to go live in Detroit, Michigan for 8 months. And it was during the actual internship that I fell in love with the industry because, here we were young people in our 20s, with the power to influence medical practice via how seriously we took the science and how well we were able to communicate the features and benefits of our products to medical professionals. And I really just thought that was incredible that we were providing this tremendous resource to physicians who didn't have time to necessarily read everything or learn everything or know everything about our products. And it was really, I really took it very seriously because we were, depending on your recommendation or not, or your thoroughness or preparedness, a doctor might make a life or death decision based on one of your medications for one of their patients. And so I just thought that was incredible. And I wanted to learn everything I could about it and really become a master in that domain.
Oh, I totally get it because I'm an ex-biopharmaceutical professional myself.
Okay,
So
okay.
just being in the thick and thin of it and being part of life-changing medications that you bring to the market that can
Right,
have such an impact, because I still remember sometimes before we kicked off a project, we would have these videos where, how patients were waiting for something to come to them that would change their lives. And once the project was complete, and then you would see these videos. I mean, of course, you're never in direct contact
right.
when you're part of the system, and you see the difference that you have made. That definitely fires you up and keeps you
hmm
going.
hmm
So share with us your trajectory in Pfizer, or you mentioned that you were GM in a couple of places. So how you started out and what were the learnings on your way? And it's okay if it's
Right.
a long answer. And when you reached to GM.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I started off as a sales rep in Detroit, Michigan, on that internship. I did another internship with Pfizer in Sao Paulo, Brazil, for 16 months, which was my next rotation. And then I graduated with my MBA at 25 and joined Schering-Plough Pharmaceuticals, which no longer exists. It was purchased by Merck in 2009. But between 2002 and 2009, I went from hospital sales rep to senior marketing director in 6 years. So I had a very fast trajectory at Schering-Plough. I went back to Brazil again in 2006 as a business unit director, and then came back to the US in 2008 as a senior marketing director, the youngest senior marketing director in the history of my company. I was 31 at the time. And in that first stage of my career trajectory, what I learned was that there's no such thing as perfection. And one of the things I talk about in my books today is, especially if you are a Black and Indigenous person of color, or a female or woman working in business, we tend to put these extra bricks in our bags that we carry around in terms of the need to show up as perfect, and we don't have any room for error. Like there's no safety net for us as we go through these corporate environments. And for me, being the only Black person in marketing for Schering-Plough for a long time, there was no safety net. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I almost broke myself in terms of, going to the hospital, having panic attacks and developing, acid reflux and anxiety disorder and all these things, trying to be perfect and trying to not be authentic. And I think that in the second part of my career, which began in
So,
2012.
Omar, I'd like for us to take a stop here at a
Sorry,
moment.
okay.
No, you're good. You're absolutely good. You talked about what you went through, that
Mhm.
we add this additional bricks in our bags, and it happens to so many people. I'd
Mhm.
like for us, our listeners, because there's so many professionals out there, they carry the weight, whether it's women just in general, or even regardless, whether
Mhm.
you're a POC or whether you are of a certain gender or anything, we all carry so many things in our brains. And this is like one of my favorite topics, is that the
Mhm.
minute you change your inner landscape, you can change the lens that you're looking the world at, and that
Mhm.
can change your behavior. And then that, once you change your behavior, you'll change your results. So let's take a moment, if you are
Mhm.
okay, to share about your feelings, like as to what did you experience and how did you turn that around.
Well, yeah, I was getting there. I mean, I just really pushed myself. I was a workaholic. Work was everything. My personal relationships kind of collapsed around the same time, because I was putting everything I had into work. Now, I had great passion for what I was doing. I love the people that I worked with. I was very good at what I was doing. But all that being said, it was just the unnecessary. There's already enough pressure in the system when you're playing the high stakes game of corporate leadership, without you adding pressure to yourself in terms of saying, listen, if I make any mistakes, it's over for me. And I think it's that idea that doesn't actually allow you to grow, because it's through failure that you grow. Basically, even the most successful professionals of all time, who we look up to and admire, had to go through a gauntlet of failure to achieve the success they ultimately succeeded in. So I think that it was the idea that once I embraced failure as learning and learned how to fail forward, and actually was more open to taking risks and doing this kind of thing, that was when I really evolved as a professional and as a leader, versus when I was just trying to make every decision be perfect and do everything right, and not have not allow anybody to say anything negative about me, because of how perfect I was showing up. I think that was the damaging part of that, and that's something that people of color especially carry, women carry, because when you don't see people who look like you in the spaces that you're in, you feel like you have to do it so well so that other people will get the same shot that you got.
Very profound, and thank you for sharing that. And then as it moved through, as you pushed through yourself, you talked about your personal relationships failing. How did you
Mhm.
handle that?
I didn't handle it very well. Yeah, I mean, my first marriage ended in that period. So I just had to regroup and basically figure out what life was going to be like for me and what was going to be how I was going to live the rest of my life and how I was going to not allow work to affect me negatively and take things more in stride and roll with the punches a bit better and once again, take a lot of the pressure out of it and start
Mhm.
enjoying what I was doing a lot more for what it was. Stop basically, I think the real transition for me was I stopped worrying about what people on top of me thought about me, and I started focusing on what everybody I was supporting and leading cared about. That moment, I made the transition between worrying about the higher ups to really being concerned about the people in my charge. That transformed everything for me.
That's beautiful, Omar. And sorry to hear about what happened initially in your personal life, but sounds like it became the fertilizer for the success in the later part in your life.
Definitely, definitely.
So, yeah, please pick the story back up again that, as you were going through this, how did you arrive at your journey
Yes,
to
yes.
becoming the GM?
So then, I came out to the US, very successful. But then Merck bought my company. So then again, there are things that are going to happen in your career that you have no control over. I was on a very fast trajectory. I probably was headed for the C-suite in that company within the next 10 years, and that company ceased to exist overnight. And so then you have to figure out what you're going to do with yourself. And I decided to take my severance package and start a publishing company, start a consulting firm, and I was working for a tech startup, and I did these things for about 2 years. And then at the end of 2012, I came back to the pharma industry, and I joined GSK in Istanbul, Turkey, leading a region called the Middle East, North Africa, Commonwealth of Independent States, or MENA CIS region, with 30 countries, and really that was where my global acumen expanded because you're traveling around all these countries from Algeria to Pakistan to Ukraine to South Africa, and really trying to learn how to influence without authority in the role that I was in while doing digital transformation, things of that nature. So I was in that job for 2.5 years, and then I got the opportunity to be general manager in Indonesia, and so I didn't even know where Indonesia was. I actually had gone on vacation to Bali a year before I got the job and didn't know that Bali was in Indonesia. I thought Bali was like its own country. And then I ended up like a year later working and leading as general manager in Indonesia. And so that was kind of the matriculation to general manager was starting my career over again, doing really, really well in the 2.5 years that I was working in a regional capacity, and then getting the opportunity to lead my own enterprise of 850 employees in Southeast Asia.
Well, that's phenomenal. So, as you reached pretty, how should I mention that, you had a very accelerated career growth. And as you were moving this fast in your career, can you share with us like some key learnings throughout that journey?
Yeah, I think that it's one of the things that I keep to this day is that sometimes we can overvalue like years of experience, and so this is where I began to understand like I call them the five business sins of inequity. One of the inequities that happens is right from the start when we're recruiting for a particular job and we're looking for, you see this all the time, must have an MBA or must have 5 years of previous experience doing this or that, or must have, I think we're kind of looking at the wrong thing, because if you've been in a single position for 5 years or have 5 years experience generally in a field, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be successful in that position. I mean, for me, the first time I was in a role, I was able to get the job and get the job done and do very, very well. But I didn't spend a lot of time in a lot of those roles. So it's not necessarily about years of service as much as it is the environment that you're coming into, how well you're onboarded, how well you're trained and supported, and how well the job lines up with your actual strengths and talents. And so, you know, the reason why I was able to matriculate so quickly was because I was able to make very good first impressions in these jobs, gather quick wins. I have a process of the first 90-day plan, and so I build these very robust 90-day plans because the way you come in is the way the job goes. And so If you build a very robust 90-day plan, and the idea of a 90-day plan is to get all of your key questions answered, along with having some quick wins, you will pretty much set yourself up for success later on in your career. Which is why now, as a leader, I really reinforce enhanced onboarding practices for my employees and make sure that they have robust 90-day plans when they come in, because I focus a lot more on onboarding and training than I do about necessarily years of experience and where you worked for previously. I don't think those things necessarily are indicative of your future success.
Some definitely great points. Because so many times what happens is that there are a lot of professionals who walk in into a job and they're like, you know what, let me get settled in, and that's the time, then I'm going to pick up the pace. And what you
Mhm.
said was so right on the market, is that having that 90-day plan and getting some quick wins, because it's during those 90 days that, regardless whether whatever you're projecting,
Mhm.
others are going to make their opinions about you regardless. So,
Mhm.
if you were to share with a lot of our young professionals, or for that matter, any professionals, as they're transitioning into a new job, what would be the key elements that they could put into place to establish that strong fundamental?
Well, I always say, make sure you have a bond with your hiring manager or your manager right from the start. And so sometimes there are managers who go out of their way to do that, but a lot of times, more often than not, managers are too busy and they don't actually spend enough time with their employees. So intelligent employees who know this framework can come in the door and kind of create this bond of trust and mutual expectations, and understand how they can work best together with their manager. And you can do that. You can pull that out of your manager in a one-on-one if you know the right questions to ask, like, what are your communication preferences, or what would, at the end of this year, what does a outperform look like in this job for you? So you understand the expectations, or you know what is the overall impact you expect to see from me in the next 30, 60, 90 days. The whole point is making sure you are lockstep with the expectations of the person who's evaluating you, because if you don't understand those expectations, if you're not clear, if they're assumed, then that's where things can get off track, and you can get disappointed later on in terms of what you're getting back from the system. So if your manager tells you, listen, I'm not somebody who does one-on-ones, but what I want you to do is I want you to pull on me when you need me, then you have to schedule the one-on-ones yourself. They're not going to do it for you. Or if they
Mhm.
tell you that, listen, I'm someone that I don't respond to email, you have to text me or call me as a communication style, then stop sending that person emails and start getting on the phone or texting them. So you can,
Mhm.
it's all about aligning these little, seemingly little things that make a big difference when you're coming into a new workplace. You're trying to make a good first impression, but also get off to a fast start.
Yeah, no, definitely some very critical nuggets there that you shared. And you mentioned about some small wins. So, from your perspective and your experience, what could be the small wins that people could go after?
Well, every environment is different, so it's difficult to say what will be the small wins in your environment. A small win could be a stakeholder map, so you understand who are the important people that your organization you're going to be interfacing with. A small win might be learning something that's going to be critical to your job. So basically, if you're like working in a medical or pharmaceutical industry, like demonstrating your learning acumen, or demonstrating your technical acumen early is going to be a quick win. But I mean, I think that the key point is to get as many questions answered as possible, so that you have the capacity now, and you have enough wherewithal to kind of navigate your way and to find those opportunities that are lying around for someone coming in. I think the biggest thing that I always ask anybody who joined my organization was, I want you to ask the why questions. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way? Why is that the priority? Because you bring that outside lens to the organization. We're all like just on the hamster wheel running, but you're coming in new. So the why questions are where you can add the most value when you're a new joiner to an organization. Asking not just the what, the how, and the when, and the where, but the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we focusing on this? And gaining that deep understanding. But in the why, usually you'll find opportunities for improvements.
No, love that. because why, people get so caught up in the what and the how, and they
Yeah.
forget their own why. That
Yes.
why was it that they got into the job first place? So that's one of the
Yeah.
things I also would like to share with our listeners, is definitely that, on days when you're finding your job overwhelming, and when you are just like, oh my God, I can't do this job, or my boss is like this, or my coworker is like this, it's so important for you to bring your why across, and also to ask, as
Mhm.
Omar mentioned, is why what things are happening. Because when you find that meaning, and then when you find that purpose, you
Mhm.
find the door to create your own opportunities. So some
Yeah.
really great nuggets here, Omar. So
Yeah.
Omar, do share with us, as your transition from your, so you mentioned about GSK, like, from there to
Mhm.
Allergan, and like when did you
Mhm.
step into your own consulting firm again?
Right. So I spent 3.5 years in Indonesia, and then I got the opportunity to go back to Brazil for a third time with Allergan as general manager of that market. And so for me, it was like amazing because I'd gone from intern to general manager in Brazil over the course of my career. And so it kind of was like a nice ribbon on what I'd been doing over the course of my career. I'd literally worked my way all the way up to the top of the house in that business, and it was very gratifying to go back to Brazil. And for me, it's kind of like symbolic that it was the natural end of that part of my career. Allergan ultimately ended up getting purchased by AbbVie Pharmaceuticals in 2017, and then basically once again, I took the opportunity to package out and come back to the U.S. After 8 years living abroad, and really I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I was already writing leadership books while I was still working for GSK and Allergan. I published Leaderboard: The DNA of High Performance Teams in 2019, and then I published the Servant Leaders Manifesto in 2020, which I published right after leaving Allergan. And so I knew that I wanted to be in that thought leadership space. I'd seen enough, working with enough people around the world, and saw enough of the same kind of problems that come from poor managers, and the top down hierarchy of work, and how people were being disengaged at work. So the Great Resignation this year didn't surprise me at all, because all the data was pointing at this moment. It was like, listen, something's going to happen. This many people can't be this unhappy and nothing happened. And so it wasn't surprising to me that we saw this kind of mass exodus from the workforce this year. And so I wanted to be a part of the solution, and wanted to give back what I'd learned along my journey. And then I realized there was an opportunity to even do more in terms of really setting the stage for modern leadership, which has to include principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The only way we're going to get to true stakeholder capitalism and providing value for employees, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders is by making sure that we're eliminating injustices, eradicating inequities, expanding diversity, and enhancing inclusion in our businesses. It's a $6 trillion opportunity in the US alone to work in the Jedi space, versus the money that we're leaving on the table if we don't embrace these causes.
So I want to ask you two questions. So, like, when
Mhm.
you are at the top, so many times what happens is that people have that eye on the prize, that I want to
Mhm.
keep on climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
So, two things. One, when you climbed on that ladder and you were there, so how did you sustain that position? And
Right.
then, secondly, as being at the top level, what could people do currently on those levels, whether it's CEOs or VPs
Mhm.
or the site leadership teams of any companies, or the
Mhm.
leadership for that matter, which are whatever titles we want to give it, to
Mhm.
include equity, diversion, and inclusion?
Yeah, so I think the answer for me on the first question is, once again, know who you're working for. So, it's not what you're working for, it's who you're working for. And so for me, when I became general manager in Indonesia, I decided that I was going to invert the hierarchy of our organization, and I was going to make myself the least important person in my organization. And I was going to focus all of our attention on the people in the organization who added value to our external stakeholders. That was going to be the style of leadership and the culture that we were going to build in our organization. And I carried that through to Brazil as well. And so for me, the way that I win is when our external stakeholders win, and our external stakeholders win when the people who are in contact and interfacing with them are supported, served, trained, and really are getting the value of the experience of their leadership team. So, really our job as leaders is not to command and control. Our job as leaders is to set strategy, but then also serve and support the people who have to implement and execute on the strategy. And so by focusing all of our attention in that direction, we're able to add more value, uncover more innovation, and respond to customer needs much faster than other organizations could do so. So I think that orientation was a key factor and a key hallmark of my leadership style, and a style that I think many more people are starting to embrace of servant leadership now.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And because what happens is that so many times people have different definitions of diversity.
Mm.
What's So, for example, like, before there was this definition of diversity by X generation and baby boomers, that it was a certain inclusion of gender and color. And now, if you kind of talk to the Gen Z and
Mhm.
millennials, what
Right.
they perceive as having the diversity of thought. What
Mhm.
are your definition and how do you approach it?
So for me, diversity is all the things you just mentioned and more. I mean, I think that ultimately what we're trying to get to, and I'm a positive psychology stalwart and someone who's also a Clifton Strengths certified coach. And so for me, I try to look at people through the lens of their talent and natural strengths. And so for me, diversity is having the greatest combination of strengths available to accomplish a given task. And so you get that diversity through different nationalities, different races, different genders, different generations, different abilities, able-bodied versus disabled bodies. You can't get enough diversity around the table, actually, because all of that, remember what our job is. Our job is to make decisions. And you make better decisions the more lenses you have to pass that process, that decision through. The more homogenous the group is, the less variability in your decision making. And so that means that you're going to be kind of like pigeonholed in making decisions. And you don't want to be pigeonholed when you're trying to innovate. You want to have as many different perspectives around the table as possible. That's what drives innovation. You want to have this productive conflict, this push and pull between all of this diversity. That's what makes it great. And so I think that is, for me, that's what we're trying to accomplish with diversity. Now, the reason why diversity gets passed through the gender lens or the ethnic lens or the racial lens is because, for so many years, while the workforce has become a lot more heterogeneous, the top of the house has stayed looking the same. I mean, 89% of CEOs in America are white males, and so everything underneath them looks different, but the top of the house, the board, everything looks the same. And so I think that, I give an example in a previous interview where I'm like, why is the board of McDonald's and the CE and the leadership team of McDonald's look so American and look so homogenous? When China is one of the biggest markets in the world for McDonald's, you should think they should have at least two or three Chinese, board members and Chinese, leaders on their team for that very important market that they have to serve. But they're not thinking like their customers, unfortunately, and that's one of the problems with diversity today is that you need to represent your communities and represent your customer base visually. You need to represent them by having those kind of people in your organization at the top of the organization, because then you're really going to be responding to their needs and what they expect from your organization.
Yeah, no, definitely some fresh perspectives there. So as we talk about it, you have mentioned that today's businesses do not need bosses. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I mean, I think that the command and control style of
Mhm.
leadership is dead, actually. I think that because so much of what we do in business and moving forward, even more so, is through collaboration. Commanding and controlling doesn't work on a team. What works on a team is trying to basically, once again, extract the combined potential and synergy of this group of people towards a given task. And you do that a lot better when you create high performing norms and you basically are executing at a high level than by simply commanding and controlling. And so I think that that is what I mean by bossing. That ego driven toxicity is not going to work anymore. I mean, one of the statistics that came from the predictive index study that was done in May or June of this year related to the Great Resignation was that of the employees who were leaving their employers, 64% of them were leaving because of a bad boss. And in companies that employees had good bosses, only 27% of them were thinking about leaving in the next 12 months. So that's a huge difference just by the person who's managing the people. That goes to show my point in terms of employees today are not going to just sit back and take toxic bossing, ego-driven behavior anymore. They want that collaborative environment. They want to be their best selves at work. They want to be engaged. They want to be working for higher purpose. And I think these are the modern leadership attributes that people listening to your show need to be embracing more so than the me imperative when it comes to why you want to be a manager in the first place.
Absolutely. And it was a great way how you tied in what you had talked about before
Mm,
about the command and control, and how when we talk about that it's not about being bosses, or it's the title may be there, it's more about collaboration than anything else. And you're absolutely right with the mass exodus that we have seen. Pandemic has had the silver lining, we can call it if we may, that people have started looking at the purpose of their lives. People have started looking at the meaning that their lives brings
mm-hmm,
to the front and center, and what they want to do, and are they aligned with their values,
mm-hmm,
where they're working at, are they aligned with their bosses. So that said,
exactly.
you have some great books out there, and please share with us how can people connect with you,
Mm-hmm.
and where they can reach you, and where can your
Yes.
books be found.
So these books are phenomenal Christmas gifts. If you're looking for gifts for your company or for your team, Leaderboard, the DNA of high performance teams, the Servant Leaders Manifesto, and Be a Jedi Leader, Not a Boss: Leadership in the Era of Corporate Social Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, all available on Amazon. If you type in Omar L. Harris, you'll come up with all my books. You go to my website, omarlharris.com. You can get autographed copies from me through my website. And then on LinkedIn, where I spend a lot of time uh, dialoguing with other leaders, solving problems together, Omar L. Harris.
Well, fantastic. So if you were to leave our readers and listeners and our audience with three top things that they could implement in their professional lives right now, what might
Mhm.
that be? That would be that they could implement in their lives and see that dial move.
So I have a principle called MHT that I talk about, which is all about mindset, habits, and tracking, or can, will, and do, the three power words. So the way you get the dial moving for yourself is to move out of the space of reactivity and into the space of proactivity. And you do that by focusing on your sphere of control and influence and letting go of things you don't have any control over, worries and things of that nature that you cannot actually influence and move the needle on. So you redirect your attention towards a proactive space where every action you take and every thought you have can actually move things forward. That's the can, the spirit of can. The will comes from high performance habits and discipline. So I think that we have to fill ourselves up in order for us to be the best leaders for our teams every day. It does require us to make sure we have the right healthy habits, right diet, the right exercise, making sure we have, the right team around us. We have our cheerleaders and our support staff, support people, and that we have our finances in order. So we have to take care of our habits. And so I think that that's very crucial. That's the will, because when you have the right habits, your will to drive and perform will be high. And then the do is all about accountability. It's all about keeping yourself on track and measuring your success and making sure you're holding yourself accountable so you can hold others accountable. And so this is really important that we don't ask others to do something we're not doing ourselves. And we also hold ourselves to the higher standard of delivery without trying to be perfect. So I think that can, will, do mindset is something you can start applying today to your life that will dramatically enhance how you close 2022 and how you 2021 and how you get off to a good start in 2022.
Very powerful, definitely. And I loved what you said in the end is like without being perfect. So definitely, as I'm sure you have experienced the winds of today's trends, is that people are looking for balance to create a holistic life of mental and physical and work well-being.
Yeah.
Can you share a tip or two for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I read a book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod that really transformed my perspective on this issue. But it's really about what are we prioritizing and why are we prioritizing certain things? So basically, if you think about the amount of time we waste in a day, on social media or watching TV programs or doing some other nonsense, and you give yourself an hour back every day at the start of your day to do personal development things like exercise, reading, learning, watching a TED Talk, gratitude journaling, visualizing the life you want to have, affirming yourself. These type of activities on a daily basis, accumulated over time, will give you so much energy and such a boost that just doing it within 60 days, you're going to be a different person than you were before you started the process. So give yourself an hour back. Take an hour out of your nonsense activities, Candy Crush, or whatever it is you're doing on your phone, and take an hour where you just fill yourself up. And I think that will make a big difference to how you show up and how you are able to proceed through your life in moving forward.
Well, definitely giving yourself that hour back, folks. And especially as we get into the holidays, it's important that you give yourself that time back and celebrate these holidays with your family because the time never gets back.
Yeah.
So, Omar, thank you so much for joining us. And we wish you a very happy holidays and a wonderful 2022.
Thank you for you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for joining us because without you, the show would not be possible. And I wish you wonderful, wonderful, happy holidays. Do spend that time with your loved ones because they're special, and find time for yourself in the midst of all the joys and celebrations and hecticness. Find that oasis of silence for a few minutes every single day, and you'll find yourself rejuvenated. So thank you for being our listeners, and we'll continue speaking this month and, of course, in 2022 as well. And thank you, Jason, for making the show possible. Appreciate you. Thank you, Omar. And until next time, take care and be powerful.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.